going on.
Yeah, okay. So it's 10 past 6, so maybe we can start.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello everyone. I will switch to Spanish, Jennifer, just to explain about the community.
Sí, sí.
You know all these things. So,
Bueno,
el meetup va a ser en inglés, gente. Primer meetup que hacemos en inglés, creo, en Ángeles, México. Eh, y segundo, no, tercer meetup que hacemos así de forma virtual. Entonces, vamos a empezar para los que es la primera vez que están en un meetup de Ágiles México, pues aquí con Marcelo les vamos a recordar un poco qué es esta comunidad y cuáles son nuestros principios. Sí, Marce.
Of course.
Perfecto. No sé si es necesaria la traducción, pero bueno, vamos. Entonces, la comunidad Ágiles México se creó para difundir la agilidad, ¿sí? Para difundir temas de agilidad. Ya tiene muchos años como comunidad y estamos muy contentos de poder hostear este tipo de eventos. Hoy, más internacional que nunca, porque tenemos a Jennifer de Estados Unidos. Entonces, nosotros tenemos ciertos principios en la comunidad, como el principio de no branding. Entonces, los eventos que hacemos nosotros no están orientados a promocionar una empresa o un producto, sino que son básicamente para compartir experiencias, para compartir conocimiento, y ese es el centro de los eventos. Si quieres traducir algo, traduce a Marce, si no, toma otro hashtag, ¿vale?
Okay. We are just saying that we are no branding. We are a community with no brand behind us, and we do not sell anything or anyone. And well, this is the maybe the main or the principle of our principles of Agiles Mexico. And I don't know if we can continue.
Okay. Horizontal, la comunidad no tiene jerarquía como tal, la comunidad es horizontal, las decisiones las tomamos como grupo y ya no hay un líder de la comunidad, una cabeza de la comunidad.
Yeah, we take decisions in a group. We are horizontal, and there is no community boss or owner.
Okay. El tercero es la comunidad es orgánica, entonces la comunidad va creciendo de acuerdo a la gente que se involucra para organizar eventos y para compartir. Tenemos algunos nodos de la comunidad que se han ido armando en el norte. Hemos hecho actividades en Acapulco y también se está armando un poquito de comunidad allá. Mucho en DF y un poquito en Puebla, pero va creciendo de forma orgánica.
We grow organically with you, with all the present, all the attendants, naturally. We have communities at the north of the country and Acapulco. We have anyone in the community can share knowledge to Agiles Mexico, just connected to Slack. Maybe we can put the Slack link in the chat at the end of the conference. And we invite you to join us, to join Agiles Mexico, to know and to be participant and even to decide anything in the activities of the Agiles Mexico community.
Perfecto. Somos multidisciplinarios en el sentido de que la agilidad es un gran paraguas que tiene muchas disciplinas, algunas técnicas, otras más humanas. En este caso vamos a hablar de empatía. Hay veces que hablamos de DevOps o hay veces que hacemos un dojo de programación. Entonces, en ese sentido somos multidisciplinarios.
Yeah, we say we are multidisciplinary. We are not only talk about project management. We sometimes share knowledge about DevOps, coding dojo. We do workshops and many things, not just agility or not just Scrum.
Okay. Somos nómades, nómades en el sentido de que pues vamos tratando de cambiar el sitio donde hacemos nuestros eventos, en general cuando son presenciales. Ahora somos más nómades que nunca porque somos virtuales, entonces este hashtag no tiene mucho sentido, pero bueno, cuando hacíamos las cosas presenciales, cuando se podía tener reuniones de más de 10 personas, éramos nómades. Cuac.
I don't know how to translate that, but well, we are nomads. We don't have a fixed place. Maybe today, yes, we have a fixed place, but
It's the cloud.
It's home. Today we are in a sharing a Scrum Mexico Zoom link, but maybe tomorrow we are working with IDS or Kairos or my personal Zoom or
any company in any Zoom or in any place.
Yeah, we can share information or knowledge to many channels and to many companies. We are not part of a fixed place.
Y sin fronteras, porque en general cuando estamos fuera de México tratamos de colaborar con comunidades que estén en esos países, y nosotros recibimos colaboración de personas de otros países, como es un ejemplo claro hoy de Jennifer aquí aportándonos en Ágiles México.
Yeah, we have no borders or frontiers. We can work with people from all over the world. And today we have Jennifer from United States of America. And well, many of you know that sometimes people from Colombia, Spain, or Argentina can visit us and share some of their knowledge with the community. And well, we have today a good example of that.
Okay, perfect. So that's all for the community messages. Marcelo, will you introduce Jennifer?
Yes, well, Jennifer is a practicant of empathy. Jennifer is an agile leader, practitioner, coach, speaker, and consultant. And well, her passion is to focus in delivering value in the workplace, and by creating communities and culture to effective product management. And well, no more words for me. We now have here Jennifer, and
thank you.
Welcome.
Wow, thank you. That was a wonderful introduction. I'm going to share my screen here. And I believe what I'd like to do is take questions at the end. This talk has been a big experiment for me. I've been rehearsing and practicing a little bit, and it's really an honor to have your meetup be a participant to give me feedback on this content, because I'm pretty passionate about it. And the topic is the science of empathy, practical ways to foster innovation. Now, on September 10th of 2019, I retired, and here I am with Dean Leffingwell. He still is, one of the most influential leaders in my career. But since I retired, it's given me the time and space to reflect on my life, what's happened, and how the experiences have shaped me. Now, here's some of the most early impactful times of my life. When I was 14, the boy I had a deep crush on was killed in a motorcycle accident. He was unintentionally hit by an oncoming car. I sobbed in my bedroom for months. When I was 21, my deepest friend, my older brother, committed suicide. And recovering from that loss took years. In fact, I probably am still not completely recovered from that. I've lost all my grandparents, my mother, my father. I've been through 2 divorces. I've lost my dearest friend through pancreatic cancer only 9 weeks after she was diagnosed just a few years ago. Now, I've had the honor of being next to some of these dear souls during their passage, which is quite the honor and quite the learning as well. I feel deeply for those that I've loved and all around me, almost too deeply to the point of it being somewhat detrimental to my health. But the learnings that are now engraved in my aged DNA start with impermanence, and they lead to what can I do to help people? And I think this has enabled the connection of empathy in myself, and this is what we're here to talk about. So what, if anything, does this have to do with agility? And in particular, this talk, we're here to talk about the science of empathy. Well, here's what it has to do with agility. Empathy is probably the single most misunderstood characteristic of human nature, but it's also one of the most powerful characteristics from an agile perspective, and in particular, a customer-centric mindset. Now, here's why it's not easily understood. It's a construct of multiple components, and each of which is associated with its own brain network. And since the brain is still not thoroughly understood, neither is empathy. But recent research suggests that the neural circuitry is the key to understanding empathy and how it evolves in our own brains. So I've introduced you to some of my life-shaping experiences, but more importantly, why should you care? Well, here's some of my real-time experiences with empathy, and you may relate or feel them as well. I have a habit of taking on what other people feel, how they think, and their experiences without really wanting to. And I can do that and separate their feelings from my own. So here's some examples. I can read a mood in a person or the room by just being there. I'm a pretty good listener, but I also get my feelings hurt easily. So that said, I have grown some thick skin over the years. I am an introvert. I follow my own intuition more often than not, but if something doesn't feel good intuitively, I will shy away. I'll pull away. And I need time alone to flourish. There's more, but I'm going to save some of those nuggets for you a little later. Now, these traits are extremely powerful from an agile coaching and leadership perspective, but they're also really exhausting. After every large-scale transformation I've been involved with, and there's been many, from financial to manufacturing to aerospace, I go down, and I mean down. I need time off, sometimes I get sick, but I walk away with some of the most amazing and deep relationships with my clients. And some of them are now continue to be part of my personal social network. Now, the premise for this talk is that empathy is the root enabler for innovation. It's also the key driver behind design thinking, and it's a critical neurological behavior that we should all attempt to connect with, or in my case, manage, if we truly want to continue to build products and solutions that people love. And we can use empathy in design thinking to become more socially responsible in our enterprise through having a more global, holistic, empathetic view of our planet and all the amazing gifts that it provides for us to be able to live and thrive. Let's start with the statement around empathy being the root enabler for innovation, and it starts with design thinking. Now, according to who you follow or who you research, there's a 4, 5, or 6-stage process to organize your data to deliver something of value. And these stages use divergent and convergent ideation patterns to continue to validate or invalidate the value delivered. And the process starts with empathy. It's also known as the discover phase. It moves into define through the divergence and convergence, through ideating, prototyping, and testing, and then develop and then deliver that value. But the reality is, as the Scaled Agile framework is showing us here, it's highly iterative as we continuously learn along the way. So let's get a little interactive with our chat window, and I can see if I can manage this. If you are not familiar with design thinking, type a 0 in the chat window. If you're not familiar, it's a 0. If you've heard about design thinking, type a 1. If you've used it to understand the problem you're trying to solve and diverge and converge on some solutions, type a 2. And if you really embrace this as part of your overall enterprise culture, type a 3. Let's see what some people are saying here. Okay, so we have some people that are familiar with it. I've heard about it. Some people are using it. And ooh, we have somebody who's really practicing it in their world. That's fantastic. All right, we're going to dive a little more into what this means. Thank you for that feedback. All right. Here's the challenge. We talked about design thinking beginning with empathy, but how do we get all of our people on board with empathy to fuel that design thinking? And more importantly, truly using customer centricity to optimize innovation to better meet our continuously changing customer needs. So I'll take a moment to breathe here and I'll let you think about it. How do we get our people on board with empathy? I was on a recent podcast, scaling testing podcast, and at the end they asked me what my next talk was going to be, and I said, oh, it's on empathy. And he said, well, Jennifer, what if we just don't have it? And I said, I know. We all do. We all have the ability to evolve our empathy, and I'll share some of the tips on how to do that. One key aspect of empathy is agency. And let's look a little bit about the philosophy of agency. Agency is one of the most important elements in developing empathetic thinking. It is the ability to think and act using cognitive reasoning across your brain, the mind, and relationship. It's your personal internal autopilot. It's deeply rooted in two primary aspects of the human condition. One is the level of ability an individual has to interact in an authentic fashion with other people, it's empathy with others, as well as a deep knowing of yourself. In other words, how well you know yourself, your own behavior, and your own actions. Well, why is that important? Well, there's many benefits, and I'm going to pull on a few that relate directly to this talk. By knowing yourself, you're empowered to see things that you were once blind to. For example, your people, your social networks, and your enterprise. And this has been quite the evolution for myself. In the 1990s, I was a product manager, and I can honestly tell you that I had not connected with agency. My team viewed me as a type A personality, which is a very aggressive personality, and personally, I was driven by getting my product to market. That was my one drive. But in reflection, that was a very egocentric behavior, and it blinded me from the people and the teams that were supporting me with getting that value out the door. From one of my empathetic collaborators' papers, The Power of Empathetic Leadership in an Evolving World, Chuck Pazesky writes, well, how do we develop agency in our leaders and our people to sense the circumstance, reflect, learn, and then figure out what that right thing to do is? Now, what a lot of what Chuck is saying here is that in order to know the right thing to do, we have to first know ourselves. I had one large global systems integrator that was preparing or launching a big program. And during the launch, the senior vice president was preparing to get on stage and provide the vision for the program. And the vision video was an incredible animation of the end goal, which happened to be getting to Mars. But there was one aspect of his visionary speech that made me quite nervous. He was going to communicate to the audience of aerospace engineers, architects, and developers that the way they were getting compensated, the way they were getting paid, was through single lines of code, SLOC. Now, while this may have been true, you're all probably giggling right now. It's not a very agile way of doing business. The right thing to do would be to do some renegotiating around true value, not SLOC. But needless to say, when he got on stage, he did have the agency to not communicate this to the train, to the value stream, to the program, as it would have had a very detrimental negative impact on the outcomes of the program. So agency and how you show up as a leader could make or break a successful idea or innovation and the social dynamic that is building it. So let's look at some of the social dynamics. The experience I've had with agency and how I've shown up in a scaled agile environment has been eye-opening. Now, that product manager job I had in the 90s, while it was full of learnings, it didn't generate the lifelong relationships that are still with me today. However, after putting in the personal development work, now for me, it was the practice of yoga. For you, it might look completely different. By practicing that internal reflection and moving on in my career in the 2000s, I could see the personal impact to the social networks. Now, most of the relationships created after the year 2000 or so, they're still dear friends, and they even are still dear friends in my retirement. So my hypothesis is that it's because I've been part of a social network of all of you wonderful agilists out there. We all have the same values, and that in combination with the agency work that I've put in has created that great connection of the social networks. Now let's talk a little bit more about values. Chuck also inspired me to read Spiral Dynamics. It's the theory of societal growth. Now, if you've read the book, I don't know if you've had or not, but you'll probably akin it to Don Reinertson's Principles of Product Development Flow, and that you're probably going to have to read it quite a few times. So let me break it down and explain some of the evolutionary structures. Spiral Dynamics classified a total of 8 levels of increasingly complex human value systems, which they coined V-memes. And they consisted of worldviews, preferences, and purpose. Now, through these value systems, groups and cultures structured their societies and individuals integrated within those societies. Each distinct set of values is developed as a response to solving the problems of the previous system. Now, the theory was further evolved into a structured evolutionary model of adaptive intelligence called spiral dynamics. Now, in short, spiral dynamics links the growth of societies through a series of stages that governed both the people and their social structures as they moved up that never-ending neurological evolution that forms empathy. Now, there's 2 parts of spiral dynamics that are super important. The first is that there can be an orderly progression of values, that people can start at a point of selfishness and low responsibility, as perhaps I did early in my career, and move past that to shared goals and purpose and a coupling to a higher cause. So yes, we can and we do evolve. And we see this in our Agile community. We all share a collective mindset around agility, and this brings us together as a society. Now, second is that given the values are associated with a given social structure, and the values of that social structure drive the outcomes that the people in that social structure want. So for example, if you organize everyone around a particular value or value stream, and that value stream has a vision and a strategy that's widely communicated and understood, the social structure will evolve to support that vision and strategy. For example, are we all aligned to create a vaccine for COVID-19? And are we going to provide some personal protective equipment for humanity worldwide? These are all visions that we can align around today. However, if there's any misalignment, and for example, the motivation is money rather than value for the customer, and everyone's individually motivated, then that egocentric behavior becomes the norm. And unfortunately, we see this today in some of our global political settings. Now, in January, the Scaled Agile Framework released version 5 of the Big Picture. And if you haven't read up on it, please do. Its enhancements are amazing. They've done a phenomenal job in providing guidance on the competencies that help an organization become more lean and eventually achieve business agility, the ability to adapt to change as an enterprise. Now, one of the things I'm particularly fond of is the concept of the dual operating system. SAFE illustrates here that as we scale, we absolutely need to leverage the benefits of a hierarchy, but it's not the hierarchy that provides or develops the network or the social structure. It's the alignment around value that influences the social network that facilitates that flow of value. For me, it's that connective tissue that makes SAFE work. It's the social fabric. It's the empathetic connective tissue that can leverage our people's knowledge and our skills, use design thinking to better address new, innovative opportunities. Now, here's the challenge as Agile leaders. How do we foster and grow this empathetic social fabric so that our enterprise can continuously innovate? Well, as Agile leaders in an organization, I think we'd all agree, it's a mindset. It's a mindset, and it's based on a series of values and principles. And I'm not going to go into all of them because we know there's at least 4 values. There's dozens of principles if you count the manifesto and SAFE. There's 7 competencies now to achieve business agility. And if you add lean, there's 5 principles of lean manufacturing and so on. But I'm going to focus on one and the benefits around it. Organize around value is the latest in the SAFE principles. This principle guides the enterprises to align their development efforts around their end-to-end flow of value. So it leverages the benefits of the hierarchy that I talked about, but it also provides the foundation to build the empathetic network directly organized around value. This network assembles the people who need to work together. It fosters the information flow and the knowledge transfer, and it provides that knowledge coherence required to truly make them a learning organization that can always innovate and deliver that value. Now, in my career, I've had the opportunity to organize around value and use design thinking to understand the problem we're trying to solve, and then apply empathy to innovate and create value for our customers. So I did spend about a half-decade serving a company at the time called Tendril. And if you've read Agile Software Requirements, the book, you'll recognize this as the case study. Now, the solution they were building included hardware, software, and firmware. And it was all designed to further extend the evolution of the smart grid to eventually put energy consumption and the management of energy in the hands of the consumers. Now, this vision created huge value to the customers. They can get access to the knowledge around their energy consumption, apply agency to do the right thing, and also play a small but pivotal role in managing our Earth's valuable resources. Now, there was one feature that my product management team prioritized we implement called real-time energy consumption on the web portal. Now, the benefit to the customer was that they could switch on and off an appliance and immediately see the energy consumption on their web or mobile device. Now, while the feature was solid, the smart grid infrastructure that was supporting it wasn't capable of providing consumption needs real time. So in order to get accurate information, the data would have needed to be uploaded through the backhaul, travel back to the utility, then be fed back to the customer via the cloud. And there was just too much latency. Real time wasn't an option. So we posed the problem to our extremely smart team of engineers, and they came together to diverge and converge on the solution using design thinking. And what they came up with was to use interpolation of estimating the energy consumption between the last two reads of the smart reader to provide the data that the customer needed. Now, this actually provided the value to the customer as opposed to trying to get that real-time data. Now, it wasn't the technological solution my product team was working for, but was wanting, but it still created enough value and interest to the customer, and we could measure the success of the feature. Now, this wouldn't have happened without the social network of passionate, empathetic people dedicated to the value stream and the solution that they were creating. So that's one big example of design thinking, but let's go deeper into the science of empathy, and in particular, how you can foster this form of innovation. We could start with Conway's Law, which has been around since Melvin Conway introduced it in 1967, which states that organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of these organizations. And even more so, the larger the organization is, the less flexibility it has, and the more pronounced this challenge is. So in other words, how we organize our teams has a profound effect on the software we produce, as well as our resulting architectural and production outcomes. And when we're talking about enterprise software, as we know, things get complex. And the social network is your key to understanding and managing the complexity in your ever-changing world. Now, at that same energy management company, Tendril, I talked about, we were organized around functional areas in the beginning of our transformation. We had an organization around hardware, an organization around firmware, and software. And this was a typical silo-based organization. But after we experienced some challenges and that resulted in the delays of value, delays of delivering real stuff, we realigned around the flow of value, and we saw all the testers embedding themselves into the teams, the hardware folks collaborating and ensuring that every team had an end-to-end testing station with the latest prototypes and boards, and that the firmware folks applied continuous integration and continuous deployment so that the software developers were always developing on the latest and greatest protocols and versions per device. Now, this evolution allowed us to go from struggling to deploy anything to being able to deploy and release when the market demanded. So we went from delivering almost nothing to dozens of releases every year. So as we know, we have to flip Conway's Law on its head and look at the value stream rather than the originating social network. So stated another way, we look how value flows and organize the social network around the flow of value. Now, another thing we want to look at from a science perspective is Frans de Waal's work on mapping empathy to the neural function in the brain. So his pyramid around empathy evolution includes emotional contagion, concern for others, and perspective taking. Now note that as each of these behaviors evolve in our brain, they're nested within each other. And let's go through each one. The first is emotional contagion. It's also known as mirroring behavior. The most common example is I yawn, you yawn, I cry, you cry. It's also a powerful initiator of larger cognitive action called modeling behavior, which is the root for role models. Initiation starts here. It's also the deepest automatic part of the brain. It's extremely important and deeply embedded in all of our brains. But using this alone, the results for the empathetic leader trying to communicate complexity and strategy is likely going to fall short. The second is concern for others. My favorite quote from Maya Angelou is, "I've learned that people will forget what you've said, people will forget what you've done, but people will never forget how you made them feel." Now, most people associate this with empathy, the feeling of experience that exists when two people sit down and communicate through trauma or a happy life experience. And the third is perspective taking or cognitive empathy, the theory of the brain. This is also known as rational empathy. It's the ability to gather information from words, from emotions, from facial gestures, as well as body language to understand someone else's perspective and then make a predictive assessment on how that person thinks. Rational empathy is scaffolded with the below alongside the different levels of the neural function that's associated. Now, this scientific behavior is really reinforced by the results of face-to-face planning. Now, I know we're all planning in a virtual world right now, but the rational empathetic experiences I've had with launching international programs and bringing all the people together, whether it's virtual or not, are life-changing. In one multi-location program launch, I had a chief architect come to me in tears after we launched, look at me in the eyes and say, "Thank you for bringing 150 years of collective knowledge together. I now know how to better connect with my peers." Now, I watched this particular person go through the emotions of connecting through rational empathy over the evolution of this worldwide social network and the program evolving. It was truly heartwarming. Techniques for rational empathy can be taught, but in order for real development, rational empathy must be practiced, as that architect did in the program launch. He practiced rational empathy with his people. Now, before we continue, let's soak this in. Rational empathy. How do you show up? After you've identified your value streams, if you were to organize around value and thus grow your own super powerful human neural network around value, how would you do this? Well, I was still inspired by Dr. Chuck and his white paper. He has 7 precepts that can help you evolve this within your organization. I've boiled it down to 4 that can help you take some action within your workforce or your enterprise. Here's the first one. Empathy is both the mechanism and the measure of understanding and synchronizing with each other. And even more powerful, empathy is the connection that allows knowledge transfer, design thinking, and shared ideas to cultivate and innovate. In essence, empathy rules relationships. And all of this provides better outcomes for your enterprise. Now think of those relationships that you're close to. Now I can think of mine. And honestly, the ones that have never evolved had low bidirectional empathy, meaning one of us practiced agency and empathy and the other one didn't. Now, I had one leader who just flat out refused to connect, evolve, and learn. And not only did he not have the empathy for the agile learning organization we were trying to create, he didn't have empathy for me and the work that I valued and delivered. So needless to say, after persisting for some months and trying to coach internally as part of my nature, I moved on. But here are some actions for increasing empathy that I have seen work well. Recognize that empathy must be practiced. Model the behavior you want to see in your employees with those throughout your organization as well as your peers. Encourage employees to socialize outside their value streams, and if you can, have all of your employees participate in some sort of direct customer contact. Now, a great example of this are the SAFE Summits. Since they started in 2013, every employee is invited and encouraged to attend. Another trick is in your one-on-ones with your folks, experiment with active listening and dialogue exercises to increase your reception and your feedback skills. You first might want to practice them with people you trust and care for, and then start to experiment with people that you don't necessarily interact with on a regular basis. So there's many tools and techniques that are used. Some of them get called out in Peter Senge's 5th discipline field book, such as the action, learning, cycle, and dialogue. You can use some of these tools to help develop those critical reflection skills. Now, increasing empathy with others requires a higher level of personal insight and reflection, as we've been talking about. So make sure you're practicing agency. It's hard to give love when you don't first love yourself. Some knowledge of the mental models that are shaping your thinking and why is going to be necessary to grow. For people to open up and connect in meaningful ways, the environment must be safe. As those openings expand and connections deepen, higher levels of safety are required. Now, this can backfire easily with one bad egg. Have you ever had the leader that just didn't care? They didn't have a clue about the emotional or empathetic safety. They didn't respond in a timely manner, or perhaps they didn't show up for your one-on-ones, or they didn't reach out to help, or they didn't make an effort to know you. Well, I have, and you know, in reflection, that leader might have been myself in my career, and that created an emotional and physical barrier that stopped all sense of safety, and therefore it stopped the communication and the innovation. Now, on the other hand, I'm sure you've had those leaders that did reach out. They do care. Be that leader and be the one that we all want to follow. Observe those attributes and try to grow that within yourself. Companies that cultivate this safety create the conditions for an empathetic environment that are in turn the foundation that is rich with creativity and innovation. Some actions for both ensuring safety in your environment and increasing it are ensure that you have transparent and honest communications of information from the bottom to the top and the top to the bottom. Establish yourself co-equally as a human being and a professional. This means letting people connect with you even when you're having a really bad day. Understand and be aware of body language. It's one of the first things people assess when they're deciding if situations are safe. Now, if your organizational chart only represents the roles and reporting guidelines, as the Scaled Agile framework does, and people generate their own connections, empathy can thrive and your culture can emerge. Even when a social structure is a typical hierarchical stack, if it's surrounded by a network and culture that values different people for their differences and encourages its members to connect outside their own little nodes, with time, a more empathetic organization will evolve. Now, the principle of reinforcement, that organizational behavior influences the people to create coherent behavior, and then in turn, the people will in a self-similar fashion influence their organization in a feedback loop, that phenomenon will occur. Some actions for reviewing and improving the structure of your organization: flatten as much as possible. While it's impossible for a large organization to have complete flatness, factors like Dunbar's number, which shows that the human grouping and relationships kind of max out around 150 people, they matter. But the fewer levels of people who you need to communicate with have to jump to get to that communication, the better off they are. Also, consider your physical architecture. Might not be as important as it is today, but when you go back to your building, look at the office arrangement and see if it matches a rigid hierarchy. Like, do you have to have a special key to get to the C-suite? Or is it a little more flat, and is it fostering the connection of people throughout the organization? And you can consider plotting the topology of your communication so you can really understand how your functional organization is communicating. So for example, who needs to connect that isn't? Are your product managers talking to your product owners? Are your architects talking to your product managers? Are your business owners talking to your teams? This is incredibly important. And then finally, look at your reward system. Are people rewarded as individuals or as programs? People, as we know, are assigned to an organization as an individual, but instead of giving individual bonuses, distribute them perhaps on a flat basis as you can, recognizing that different people across an organization can often go unrecognized. And here's the last one that ties into values. The levels of empathy are always tied into the different values. So as we proceed up the empathetic evolutionary scale, our values change. Well, here's some examples. Survival values may mean fighting your brother or sister over that glass of water or candy bar. And tribal values affirm that the same privileges to everyone are in your group and are likely involve sharing that water and that candy with your whole tribe. Performance-based values means sharing the water and food with your team members in an optimal way. Communitarian values involve recognizing everyone's individual needs and identities and sharing the food and resources with the people with shared norms, but different needs. And finally, global holistic values create concern for people combating COVID-19 around the world. Now, using agency and reflective awareness and the self-empathy it requires means a divorce between self and your egocentric behavior and having a greater attempt at empathizing with others. This has a profound effect on your bottom line. It's good for your customers and it's good for this planet. So let's breathe again and focus on those precepts that resonate with you. What if you can't do it all? It sounds like a lot. Well, take baby steps. Start with yourself, apply agency. Any small step you can take to becoming a more empathetic individual will help create the foundation for empathy within your organization. Now, here's where it gets real, and especially in today's pandemic. It doesn't stop with your organization. We're here because we've been blessed with a planet that can sustain life, and as we know, our world is in jeopardy. As stated in Lynn Twist's book, The Soul of Money, for too long, the economy has been viewed as separate from ecology. But nature has showed us that they're joined, and in fact, the economy is a subset of the ecology. Social responsibility has become a huge aspect for this entire planet and the economy that takes from it. Now, what steps can you take to make your organization more socially responsible? Practice empathy beyond the organization at the local, regional, and global levels. Now, according to PwC PricewaterhouseCoopers, the combined market cap of the world's 100 largest companies topped $21 trillion last year. And in the past decade, the biggest of the bigs saw their value nearly double. $21 trillion. Now, Lynn Twist would recognize that amount of money holed up in those organizations as a blocker of flow. And Don Reinertson would hate that. And even more so, how can we rebalance some of this wealth? Create the agency that inspires companies to give back, not just through wealth taxes that some politicians would tout, but through the sheer desire and passion about our earth, the empathetic will of these organizations. So given the time, the space, and the evolutionary practice that we've been discussing, anyone can approach the world with this collective mindset. And we're starting to see our enterprises do the same. So imagine if all enterprises gave back a portion of their profits to nonprofits and the health and humanity of this earth. Imagine if this was knitted into the purpose of each and every organization down to each employee level. Well, there is hope, and enterprises are aligning to the global holistic values as well as adapting to change. Never in our lifetime has the alignment of global holistic values and adapting to change been more important than it is now today. There's two companies that I've had the honor of working with that have done this in different ways. Scaled Agile is a member of Pledge 1%, and at Pledge 1%, they believe that all companies have the capacity to give, and they're there to help map out a timeline and giving plan that aligns to your values and your larger business goals. And you can be a driver of this movement and shift the culture to help companies stand at the forefront of both economic and social change. And Tendril, the case study in the Agile Software Requirements book that we've been talking about, is now Uplight. It's a Series B corporation. Yes, they've evolved. Series B corporations are businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency, and legal accountability to balance the profit and purpose. Now, B Corps are accelerating at a global culture shift to redefine the success of business and build a more inclusive and sustainable economy. I'm going to read Uplight's mission because I think it's pretty powerful. They have the ambitious goal of reducing the CO2 emissions by more than 100 million metric tons and saving consumers more than $10 billion on their energy bills over the next 5 years. That's equivalent to removing more than 21 million cars from the road. It's a pretty powerful global, holistic, and socially responsible mission. And personally, my biggest purpose, my only purpose since retiring, is to spend the rest of my years giving back to the community and this amazing planet. And I couldn't have gotten there without the experiences that I've been blessed with and the people that have helped me evolve throughout my career. So I'm completely grateful. And while you're here on this earth, knowing that we're all impermanent, what can you do? So here's some ideas. Start by leveraging your people. Leverage design thinking. Start with understanding the problem we're trying to solve. Practice agency. Allow the time and space for innovation. Ask powerful questions of your people. What can we do to not only deliver value to our current customers, but show them that we're committed to the global cause as well? Now, this has been my greatest joy, and it's also the reason I'm here with you today. I can't bring back any of those beautiful souls that have been lost in my life, but now my purpose in retirement is to give back to this earth, give back to the people who live on it today, and while I'm here, try to leave it in a better state. Now, I'm just one person. How the heck can I do that? Well, for me, it's showing up here right now is step one, and continuing to innovate and evolve this message. So join me. Sometime in your next virtual meeting, turn to the person next to you and ask, what inspires you to innovate in your life, to evolve agency, connect with empathy, and help solve some of our world's problems? And how can you become more socially responsible as an enterprise? And where are we going to begin? Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Jennifer. It was a really nice message. Really, really nice message. I was like a little confused, but thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I don't know if people from the audience has any question for Jennifer. You can put the question on the Q&A or just in the chat. You know, it's really different from me and from a lot of people to get this concept, because we have the more technical background, so it's difficult to move to the empathy. Yeah, this is really necessary. So I don't know if anyone has any question for Jennifer.
Oh, thank you, Alejandro. Claudia, thank you, Mary. So my hypothesis for this talk was that I could create something that was inspiring. And the measurement that I have was that I could get invited to share the message more often. And that's it. That was my whole hypothesis and how I'm going to measure success. Well, if you do have more questions, my Twitter account is at Jennifer W. Fawcett with 1 T. It's on the first slide. Feel free to reach out or comment. I'm here to help.
Perfect. We recorded the talk. We have the first question here from Rodrigo.
Yeah, can you share some more methods and ideas to start empathizing a bit more? Well, back to yourself. Start with yourself and reflecting on your own behaviors and your internal traits, what inspires you. And then practice with other people. One way that I always practiced was with my son, empathizing with him, listening, trying to put myself in his own shoes. I mean, he's 30 years my junior. It is definitely a different world for him. Empathizing with my husband and my family and what they're dealing with in today's world is a perfect start on how to begin empathizing. And then you can bring it to your enterprise. Practice with the ones that are closest to you, and then slowly start to bring it to your enterprise. Organizing around value is going to help, because those folks will have that common purpose to be able to innovate and share the knowledge around what they're trying to do, the problems that they're trying to solve. I hope that helps, Rodrigo. Oh, I see some in the Q&A as well. Let's see. Okay, so Fernando says, what do you think about the difference about building empathy in a new relationship that's trying to turn over empathy with a client with a rough relationship? Yeah, those are the challenging ones because they do take time. I always would start with putting my own feelings aside and really just being present to listen, observe, watch the dynamics that are happening in the room, and only insert myself when I think there's something helpful that I can provide, allowing themselves to work through it, but yet providing some reflection for them to grow. It is hard when there's a rough relationship, and don't expect that to turn overnight. I've had some of my roughest relationships turn into some of my most beautiful relationships, and also recognize that people, it's not a linear curve. It goes like this. You might see some advances, and then you might fall deep into an argument or a disagreement, and then come out of that with a deeper, more loving relationship. So it does take time. Empathy is like an exercise. You can go to the gym and do it. Give me an example of an empathy exercise. Oh, well, one exercise I always use is the breath. So instead of reacting, I'll use my reflective relationship with myself to just repeat back what I've heard and try to put the knowledge and the reaction back on the person that's throwing it out there. I think that's a good way to start the conversation with your empathy gym exercises, is just start listening. Ask the question, how can I serve? What's on your mind today? What's bothering you today? So coaching with powerful questions is a great way to start as well. Oh, and Diana says, how do you start the conversation with top executives who are only thinking about getting something or some code out the door, and they don't feel they have the need to take that step to back into the view of topics of empathy or design thinking? Well, this is the challenge, and this is highly visible today, where our companies are struggling. They're practically going out of business. They're running out of money, and our leaders are trying to balance the getting value out the door or changing their business model to serve the enterprise or the world in a different way, because the value they delivered before is no longer delivering the value, or people aren't buying it. So this is the constant dichotomy that our leaders are trying to balance. Now, they might not be empathetic at first, but sitting with them and coaching with them and having them understand that, yes, we want to make money, but the only way we're going to do that is through connecting with our people. You could perhaps help coach them around the message that they're trying to deliver, or even their body language around how they deliver that message are great ways to start as well. Yeah, start with yourself, but where do we start? It's a completely different mindset. You know, your practices on self-awareness may vary throughout the world. I mentioned mine was yoga and breath. That's how I started. Your personal reflection might start with another practice around it. So I can't really recommend what works for you, but you can look into you know, understanding what drives yourself. What is giving you joy in your life, and how can you evolve that joy so that it comes out naturally within you. Oh, I guess I was supposed to type the answer, but those were a lot of words, so I didn't. Sorry. Oh, Twitter. Yeah, I'll type in my Twitter. That's my Twitter. And then somebody says, how could you enable the way for people to empathize with you? Sometimes they don't. And I think modeling the behavior is the best way that you can start to connect with people that don't empathize with you. Sometimes a crisis will create that ability to connect and start that empathetic tissue, that empathetic fabric to start. I always would get to know my people intimately from a family perspective. You know, what's happening at home, how are your kids, how are your chickens, how are your horses, how's your grandma, you know, those types of things. One really powerful experience I had was during a big launch. The system team was really struggling with what they thought they could deliver, and they were struggling because they were trying to support a current release while the program was asking them for a new release at the same time. And they really struggled. And I said, look, guys, just be honest with yourself. What can you do? I can't tell you what you can do, but you have the knowledge and the skills to understand what can be done within this time frame. So they did. They were honest and transparent, and they said, look, we really can't develop any more value during this time frame because we know we have to support the new the current release. So at the end of that launch, I was at the train station, and one of the system team came and sat down next to me, and he just started sharing his family and what he does and what his relationships are like. And it started by just listening to them and looking them in the eye, having a very safe body language, and using empathy myself to show that we are connected. We are connected in this world in a way that is completely profound. Thank you. I can't wait to come visit Mexico. It's on my list. Well, I'll pass it back to Marcelo to perhaps close us out if there's no more questions.
So yeah, there's no more questions. All the webinar will be on YouTube. We will put it in YouTube maybe tomorrow. So thank you very, very much, Jennifer. Welcome to Mexico, to Ágiles Mexico. We hope to see you again in Zoom, or it's better in person. But thank you very much. Let's keep in touch.
Yeah, thank you, Herman, and thank you, Marcelo, and thank you to your entire community.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. See you soon.
Ciao.